Welcome to the Blooming League of Original Podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Talk Musicals to Me, a new theatre podcast about musicals and their impact on people. My name is Caroline Sheen, and I'm here to quiz some of the leading creatives in the entertainment industry about their relationship with musical theatre and how certain musicals may have influenced their lives in ways you may not even expect. From how they first encountered a musical to musicals they may never even have seen, let's dive in and introduce today's guest to open up and talk musicals to me. Today, we're not on Zoom. We are coming to you from the historic Theatre Royal Drury Lane in London's glittering West End, where previews of Hercules are underway and the show is preparing for its grand opening in a couple of weeks. Now, I'm here to interview somebody wonderful, someone who has changed the landscape of musical theatre, both here and on Broadway. He is my old boss from Mary Poppins. He's the man who gave The Lion King to the world. He's the chief creative officer of Disney Theatrical. He is Mr. Tom Schumacher. Tom, welcome back to London and welcome to Talk Musicals to Me.
Well, I'm tickled to be here, and I'm tickled to be here live, not on Zoom. We're pioneering this for you.
We are. This is a new thing for me.
So that means you had to get dressed for this call.
I did. I'm not in my pajamas.
That's good. Okay.
And I have proper shoes on, which is
well, there we have it.
So I remember, Tom, coming to New York when I was out in America doing Mary Poppins, and you gave me this wonderful tour of your office above the New Amsterdam Theatre, around all the building and upstairs where there was like an old cabaret venue and stuff. And I just remember leaving that theatre and thinking, oh my God, I just want to be able to sit Tom Schumacher down and talk to him about musicals for an hour. And so 15 years later, I'm managing to make that happen. This is the only reason I've done this podcast.
Well, I'm troubled to think that was actually 15 years ago.
I know, it's mad,
that
isn't it?
feels like a hot minute.
That was 2010. Yeah.
Wow.
Mad.
Well, you know, that whole space has developed. The old cabaret theater is now the office.
Yeah.
And the stage up there, that is now just office space, but there's an actual stage in a proscenium. On that stage, Julie Andrews rehearsed My Fair Lady, the original production, and Ethel Merman rehearsed the original Gypsy. And Rose's Turn was written in that room because they ran out of time to do a big dance montage in the show. So Stephen Sondheim, Steve took the tunes that were in the show and he put them together as a mashup in one song, and they kind of improvised Rose's Turn and taught it to her the next day in that room.
In that room. Musical theatre history was being made then and it is being made now. You continue that legacy, Tom. That's amazing. So my podcast, Talk Musicals to Me, I come up with 10 questions. They're the same 10 questions I ask everybody because I think you've probably done a lot of interviews about the work you've done, where all of that has come from and everything. What I want to find out is the musicals behind you, the musicals that inspire you and have had an impact on you, not just the ones that you have been massively involved in. But of course, we will touch on them as well.
You know, I did a homework assignment, which I normally do not do.
You've been a very
I
good
fly
boy.
by the seat of my pants, but I actually made notes because I had to make sure I remembered. I had to really think through. Your questions are very, very good.
Thank you so much. So Tom doesn't have a huge amount of time because he's here with Hercules and they are literally rehearsing on the stage behind the doors I'm looking at. So there's a lot going on. So let's crack on. Tom, what was the first musical you ever met? How did you first meet musical theatre?
My mother, who was born in 1928 and grew up in Napa, California. She was born in Napa, California. She, for whatever reason, loved musicals. She didn't go to a lot of musicals, but she loved the cast albums. So in my house as a child, early on, I have the distinct memory of listening to The Sound of Music, the original stage version with Mary Martin, and of course, Carol Channing, the original stage version of Hello, Dolly, and Robert Preston in The Music Man. And when you were sick at home and you couldn't go to school, my mother would put on those musicals. And we would listen to them on the stereo, needle drop record. And those were huge to me. But then there's two ways of meeting. Those are the ones that I encountered just as a listener. But to encounter it by doing it, the first thing I ever did like that was actually in the operetta Hansel and Gretel by Engelbert Humperdinck, who everybody thinks Engelbert Humperdinck was a singer in the 60s, but he actually stole the name from a composer. I think it was written in the late 1890s or something. And I played the father in that, and I can still sing a few tunes from it, but not for you today.
Not today. Do you know what? I did Hansel and Gretel in school. It was like a school's version.
Yeah.
They were the original Humperdinck songs. I love that we have that in common.
And then the first musical that actually knocked me over that I met on film was the beautiful, beautiful original film, 1969 was it, version of Oliver. And then Oliver changed my life completely. I saw the world through the lens of that show for a very long time.
I love Oliver. I did that in school as well. And I was saying to another guest on the podcast, it's one of those shows, there is no song that you skip on the cast album. Every single song is what they say in the UK. I don't know if it would work in an American accent, but we would call it a banger. Yeah. Every song is a banger. And I just think that score, that timeless story is just so special. And it doesn't feel like it doesn't belong in Victorian London. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't feel like it was written in the 60s.
Yeah, I bizarrely became friends with Lionel Bart during the last probably 10 years of his life. And I would see him quite a bit. And I remember telling him about how much that meant to me to see the original film. And then I've done a stage production. I've been around it a lot. I played Charlie Bates in a production who only has one line, which is, "These sausages are moldy." And Fagin then shouts at him, "Shut up and drink your gin." And Lionel and I would act this out all the time. He would say, "Say it. Say it." Sometimes in the theater, I'd hear someone behind me say, "Say it." And it was Lionel sitting behind me. He'd call on the phone and just do it. I think it's so timeless because of the way Lionel composed, because he didn't, play. So he would sing next to someone at the piano and they would. So the songs have a purity to them and they're not overcomplicated or showy. And I think that kind of stripped down quality of those songs lingers with us. And actually, almost anybody can sing those songs. So you carry them in your heart, not unlike our mutual friend Richard Sherman's songs, right? The Sherman Brothers wrote like Lionel. They're simple songs,
They're singable, aren't they? People will leave the building singing them, and that would be incredible.
So I didn't have one. I had a lot of things.
No, that's great.
I met so many all at the same time.
So when you met Oliver, were you that age? Were you an Oliver age?
Yes. Yeah. And I wanted to be one of Fagin's boys.
Yeah.
I wanted to be in that movie. I wanted to be with those kids. And the dark side of it didn't scare me. I just wanted the companionship of that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, seeing it on stage was such a revelation.
Growing up in America, did you feel like that was a very British story? Did you feel like it spoke to you? Did it feel like a different world?
It was so odd because people tell me today that Oliver is here what Annie is in America. And that's a kind of a commonly said thing, that Oliver doesn't really work in America. But I just love it. But I've never felt that divide.
Yeah.
I recognize, because I've spent so much of my life traveling, I sort of feel at home wherever I make a friend, and that show was my friend.
Oh, I love that. It goes for like boys and girls as well, I think. Oliver is to boys what Annie is to girls. I grew up wanting to be Annie. I just loved it, and it was full of girls, and they were crazy and rebellious and a rabble.
I love a production. The more crazy the girls are in Hard Knock Life, I know I'm going to be happy if they're like really like messy little girls where no boys are judging them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. So you mentioned that Hansel and Gretel was something you were in on stage. Was that something you continued to do? Did you do more shows?
Oh, I did. I performed a lot. But weirdly, I grew up outside of San Francisco and came of age in musical stuff in the 70s. And there was so much funding for the arts, probably like it was here at one time.
Yeah.
Where arts councils, and I had so much money that I was in shows, but I was also directing shows. I directed 6 productions for the city I lived in. I was a city employee. They hired me at 16. From 16 to 18 years old, I directed 6 productions. People just a tad younger than I was. And one of them was a play I wrote. We would do 3 a year and then take the summer off and then do another 3. So I was directing, which also meant in those cases I was mostly producing my own stuff.
Yeah.
And they would just, there's a budget and you would do it. And all these 50 or 60 kids would come audition for 10 or 12 or 20 roles based on what we did.
And were they all musicals? Were they plays?
No,
as
they were
well?
just plays. No, those I didn't do as musicals. I also, at that age, was directing Your Good Man, Charlie Brown. I think I did that one twice on the original set, which bizarrely a friend of mine owned. And then even weirder than that, Joe Hardy, who just passed away this last year, who had the idea of how to direct Your Good Man, Charlie Brown, the original production. And I became friends much later in life. And then I asked him, how did you come up with the idea that it was just those blocks? Because it was just blocks. The original production was just a psych and blocks. But oddly, that one I directed as a teenager with an all-adult cast.
Oh, wow.
One of whom had done it for like 5 years in San Francisco. Crazy, huh? It was weird.
I wonder how they felt being directed by somebody so young.
I don't know if I came off as young as I was. I lectured once at San Jose State University when I was 18 years old, and it went fine. It was for recreation majors or something, and I did a whole thing, and it was all fine until they found out I was in high school, which is weird.
So you were at high school all the time? You hadn't dropped out and
No, I didn't drop out, but I only went to school a few hours a day. I didn't go a full day.
Right.
I would leave before lunch.
Because you were too busy.
I was way too busy.
You were too busy for school.
Years and years later, I realized it's because the school didn't want me there. I don't think they wanted me on campus. I would come in the morning and I would do the good morning, good morning. It's September 15th, 1975. Please stand and repeat with me the Pledge of Allegiance. And then I would do sports scores and tell you what happened yesterday. And I'd go to class for a few hours, then I'd leave and go about the rest of my important life.
I love
It's inexplicable today. Who would allow a child to do this?
You had far too many better things to be getting on with, Tom.
I had a job, I had dance class, and I was the custodian of the dance studio to pay for the dance class, and I had rehearsals at night for the community theater show. I had things to do.
Now, I read something about that dance studio, or I heard, because I've been doing a little bit of research, that dance studio was the same studio where somebody learned...
James Monroe Iglehart, who won a Tony as the genie in Aladdin, James learned to dance at the studio that I used to sweep the floors in.
Isn't that just
sweet?
Way too brilliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. So having done that, and now you've become this incredibly successful man of the theatre, not including your Disney shows, which show did you go and see the most, on your journey to becoming who you are today?
Not out of some plan, but the two shows I have absolutely seen the most. Hello, Dolly. I've seen every conceivable person play Dolly Levi, partly because I have such affection for the show. I've done it. I played Barnaby Tucker. My mother loved the show. She did get to see Carol Channing do it.
Wow.
And so Dolly I've seen more times than you can imagine. I mean, of the famous Dollys, of course, I saw Carol Channing do it many times. In fact, I was paid, since they're all deceased, I will tell you.
Yeah.
In the 80s, I was paid to stand up. I was doing press for Carol with a company called Solters, Roskin and Friedman. And I would accompany Carol to various publicity events. And she'd go to the department store, and then we had a recording, and she'd sing Diamonds, a Girl's Best Friend. She'd promote the production of Dolly. And she'd always open it with, "Good afternoon, ladies of Encino and environs." Which always cracked me up that she would do that. But I asked her once, we were driving around in this car all over LA doing these press events, and I said, "This must be so hard for you." And she said, "What, dear?" And I said, "Well, you have to do the show tonight, but you're doing press all day." And she said, "Dear, this is my day job.
Wow.
And if I don't do my day job, I can't do my evening job."
Yeah.
And she took it so seriously. But I saw her do it. I saw Pearl Bailey do it.
Wow.
Which was great. I saw Tyne Daly do it, and of course, Patti LuPone do it, and Bernadette, and millions of other, I saw Imelda do it here.
Yeah. And I think this theatre...
Mary Martin did it here.
Mary Martin, and I think Ginger Rogers did it as well.
Did she?
No, maybe Ginger Rogers might have done Mame.
Ginger Rogers, Betty Grable, so many ladies did it in New York. And, when it played New York and every lady did it, and then they did the Pearl Bailey version, Pearl Bailey and Cab Calloway, then Merman came into it to close it. And for Merman, Jerry Herman put back the songs that he had cut, because he'd written it for Merman. Jerry told me all about it, Jerry Herman. And he knew I was obsessed with the show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he told me lots of stories about it. But they put in these songs that they'd written for Merman, which kind of reshuffled the show a little bit.
Yeah. And I feel like the recent version with Imelda, that was kind of reshuffled, and there were songs in it.
I have a weird small part in that, because I tried to get a musical made at Disney, an animated musical made with Jerry, and it never came together. But it was a sweet, sweet idea. idea, that Princess and the Frog idea.
Okay.
But I was talking about doing a version of Dolly with him, and we were at the Polo Lounge, famous place in Beverly Hills. And I asked him if there's anything he'd want to change. And he said, I would like to change the opening number to Just Leave Everything to Me, and not from the movie, which he wrote for Barbara Streisand, and take out I Put My Hand In. And he said, I just think Just Leave Everything to Me is better, and it's got more momentum. And we had talked about doing that. That was one of the changes that we had talked about, if we were going to do it together. And I mentioned that to Michael Harrison, and then he did it.
Wow. I do love Hello, Dolly. I love that score. I just think it makes my soul sing, that score.
Do you know the funny story about Hello, Dolly and Mame? Because in the film version of Hello, Dolly, right before the Harmony Gardens, you push up to the window and she sings, don't look for shooting stars, love is all I love. That was actually written for Mame and cut.
No way.
Yeah, Jerry Herman told me that too. I asked if he had to write that, because there's a whole rule about you need a new song to be qualified for a film. And he said, well, I had the song because we cut it from Mame. It was Patrick asked Mame before the hunt, Auntie Mame, do you love Uncle Beauregard? And then she would sing that. And out of town, they cut it before they came in.
And then they used it for
Look at these things that probably all of your listeners know, but I've told you.
This is why I want to sit and talk to you like this. This is so brilliant. Were you going to mention a second musical?
Absolutely is Dolly and then Gypsy.
Oh, and then Gypsy. Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
No, I just realized I melded them. I was talking about Dolly, but Bernadette and Patty and Tyne Daly were all playing Rose. Yeah, I had them here in my notes. Like, those are the two I've seen most of all.
Right.
Because they just come up all the time. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting a production of Gypsy these days.
Yeah.
So.
And I feel like more so in New York than here. We do have it here every now and then. Imelda did that as well. But that was the first for years, I think. Yeah. It feels like it's much more a sort of Broadway fable.
Bernadette did Dolly, and that was the first big production.
Yeah.
Because it showed that Carol herself, Karen Channing, would revive.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to tell you that when I encountered Carol the first time, her husband then, Charles Lowe, would pay me $25 to sit in the front of the orchestra and stand up in the middle of the Dolly number.
That's brilliant. And lead the standing ovation.
People sometimes need encouragement. The front of the theater, you'll notice this. Oftentimes, the first 10 rows don't know that everyone behind them is standing.
Yeah.
Like, somebody needs to, get off your keister.
Yeah. I remember there was a big production here of a big revival with a big British star, and I'm not going to name who it was, but I do know that the company manager would go around front of house and start her entrance applause every night when she walked on stage.
I'm trying to think who taught me the trick of a leading lady making her first exit in a play, that if you turn upstage, you can clap while you're walking out and start the applause.
Clap yourself as you leave the stage. I will take that on board.
Try it. See if it
works. I should have done that in Mary Poppins as I walked off.
Yeah, wasn't that kind of show where they would, they clapped on your arrival.
Yeah. And they clapped because my exit, to be fair, my exit was in the air, flying over all their heads. And there was quite a lot of applause.
They are all so happy when they see that.
It's the best. It's just wonderful when you fly out over. Did you ever get to try it? Did you ever get to try flying?
No, I did a number of the flying moves from Tarzan. But on Poppins, it was such a delicate rig.
Right. Thank you for telling me that now, not before.
No, because we just didn't want to screw it up.
Right.
I did have a fight with a fire marshal in one city where they had a policy of how they wanted to be able to bring the fire curtain in. Yeah. They wanted to test it with the actress in it.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no.
No.
We had a big argument about that.
There was one city in the States where I didn't fly. I think it was Indianapolis.
They wouldn't let you fly?
I don't think they had the structure front of house for me to be able to fly out. I flew on stage, but I didn't do the front of house one there. So my next question is, which musical made you laugh the most and which made you cry the most?
For two different reasons. I had to think about this question quite a bit. Shucked, while you and I are here, Shucked is actually playing in Regent's Park, and it's all friends of mine on that show. And I saw all the development stages of it. And I would be weeping from laughing so hard at that show. I just laughed and laughed and laughed. And there are jokes in it that my pal Robert Horn wrote that I laugh out now that he's cut from the show, and I still laugh at those jokes.
Even though they're not there.
They're not even there. And
just hear them in your head.
I hear them in my head. I laugh so much at that. I remember being at the O'Neill Festival right when I got back from being here for a long time during the pandemic, and they did a workshop of it. And I laughed and laughed. And my pal Jack O'Brien, who directed the very first professional play I ever saw, and he directed that. Isn't that crazy? I didn't even know that till I was doing the TED Talk. And I was researching the TED Talk and talking about this production I'd seen. And I called and said, Jack, did you direct this? It was like 1971. And he went, yes, why are you asking? I said, because I saw it. It was my first professional play that I ever saw.
What play was it?
You Can't Take It it with you.
Oh, yeah.
And then he admitted that he stole that version from Ellis Rabb, great American director.
I want to say George Kaufman and Moss Hart play, yeah?
Yeah, oh, yeah, it's a classic American play.
I did their other play, or one of the other plays they did, Once in a Lifetime.
Once in a Lifetime?
Yeah.
Man Who Came to Dinner is theirs, yeah. Moss Hart, that office in the New Am, Moss Hart's first job on Broadway was working on the 8th floor where my office is, in that very building, his first job on Broadway. And the greatest thing he did at the end of his career was directing My Fair Lady, which he did down the hall from his first office. Wow. Can you imagine that?
I love his book, Act One. If anyone's listening and you want a really good theatrical read, order Act One. It is one of the best books about theatre I've ever read.
That's a must read. And the other one is called Dazzler, and it's the story of Moss Hart in great detail.
Oh, that's brilliant. Another really good book, and he hasn't told me to say this, but I have it at home and I love it. It's called The Show.
How Does the Show Go On?
How Does the Show Go On? And it's written by Tom Schumacher, and it is an introduction to every aspect of theatre production. Think of any aspect of theatre production and it's in that book telling you how to do it. But it's so accessible. It's mainly for children, right? But
I know a surprising number of adults who've read it.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what an actor does because you can see it. But you know, as an actor, there's nothing to see if everyone else isn't doing their job.
Yeah.
And there are so many other jobs in the theater, and they're so important.
And I think for me, like reading it, I'm like, oh, that's, of course, you know, I don't know what happens in the lighting box or in the sound box or anything like this. It's all out there in the dark. I have a pretty good idea, but it's great to sort of read it and learn where it all happens and how it all happens and how important it is.
I've been paid to do almost every job in the theater, even if I did a rudimentary version of it, you know, running light board, working in the box office, except playing the orchestra.
Oh, what would you play if you were in the orchestra?
I play nothing well. I might play the harmonica. I play the Appalachian dulcimer. I can play a couple of tunes on the ukulele, not well. I can do a few Pete Seeger songs on the guitar, nylon string only, thank you.
Brilliant.
And I play 2 songs on the piano. That's it. Quite unaccomplished as a musician.
So if we could find a show in which you could do all those maybe 6 or 7 things, that would work.
If I had to do each one just for 4 bars.
I'm going to go home and Google the Appalachian dulcimer.
Oh, you'll love it.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Sounds really cool. So, Shucked made you laugh the most?
Shuck made me laugh the most.
What show make you weep the most?
I thought about this question a lot because your questions are quite provocative about all this. But the one that makes me weep the most is not because the plot is sad.
Yeah.
It's because it's perfect. And that's A Little Night Music. A Little Night Music, I think, is perfect. Of the cast albums, I love the London cast album with Gene Simmons most, but Glynis Johns is wonderful in the American version, and Hermione Gingold is in both. I saw Gingold do it. I saw Gene Simmons and Gingold do it on tour in America. I love that show at a profound level because I just think every element of the score is stunning. You know, it's rarely done well.
It's a difficult show to do well.
Really hard to do the quintet and the whole thing. I just love it. I like how the music stacks. By the time we get to the end of the first act and we're off to a weekend in the country, I just cannot believe it. It's the rhythm of the lyric. It is the beauty of the melody. It is the simplicity of songs when they need to be, you know, the late edition of Send in the Clowns. And it makes me cry when I hear it performed. I don't like seeing it if it's not done well, but boy, I'm so happy to be with that score. Not because the story is sad, but because it's just perfect. How many things are perfect?
I think that is probably where I come in to being emotional in the theatre, when things overwhelm me with their brilliance and the attention to detail, and it is when you see something as close to perfection as it could possibly be.
I love music that anticipates being combined, you know, that you hear this, you hear that. Menken does it. One of my favorite Alan Menken things is in The Little Mermaid. It's the If Only Quartet. And on the cast album, you get to hear Norm Lewis, Sierra Boggess, Heidi Blickenstaff, and Titus Burgess all singing. And it's just unbelievable.
And you don't foresee it coming because you hear the tunes and then suddenly they're all together.
Actually, no, Heidi's not in that. No, Prince Eric is in that.
Oh, wonderful.
And you hear the whole thing stacked up. And it's just so perfect. Yeah.
I think when things work musically, it almost does something physically. to a human being. I think because it speaks to some kind of part of your heart that other things cannot reach.
The late Mike Ockrent, not long before he passed away, we had done this thing called King David that Tim Rice and Alan Menken wrote, that we opened the New Amsterdam Theater with. Beautiful oratorio on the life of David and Saul and all that. And it was this amazing cast. Judy Kuhn was in it. I mean, everybody was, it was so great. But Mike, not long before he died, gave me a book called Music, Ecstasy, and the Brain.
Oh, wow.
And in it, among the many, many things that tells us why we like music, is that it hypothesizes that music is the only sensory experience that is not dulled by repetition. For example, take a scoop of coconut sorbet. The fifth bite does not taste as good as the first bite.
Yeah.
Because you were dulled by repetition. Rub the back of your hand, anything. Things are dulled by repetition as when they're sensory. Mm-hmm. You stop feeling it. But music, if I play something you love, the 10th time you want to hear it the 11th time.
Yeah.
Not if it's an earworm that you don't want to hear, but if it's something that you love, every time you hear it, it makes you feel special.
Bang on the money, as we would say. When I speak to Americans, I kind of turn super British, but
well, I like
that.
That.
Is bang
Authenticity
on the money.
is important.
Yeah, and he was British, right, Mike Ockrent?
Yeah.
So there we go. Mike Ockrent was bang on the money. I have a confession, and it's one that probably means I shouldn't be hosting this podcast, but I've never seen a professional production of West Side Story.
Well, that's appalling.
It's appalling, I know. It's not done loads over here. It is done enough, so I should have seen it.
But this is a question on your list. When I taught at Columbia University for 10 years, I would always ask everybody what is the show they're embarrassed, play or musical, that they should know and pretend to know and lie to their friends as if they know.
I do know it. I've seen the films.
You've seen the film. I couldn't come up with one.
Oh, see, that's why you're where you are, John.
I couldn't come up with one. I'm sure there's something important that I haven't seen, but I couldn't for the life of me come up with it. And Matt West, who choreographed the original Beauty and the Beast, and now this new version we did that toured England, we started in Bristol during the pandemic, he's literally in Schenectady, New York, directing and choreographing a new production of Beauty and the Beast that literally this show closes on the 24th of June, and I will fly on the 25th to New York and then get in my car at the airport and drive to Schenectady, New York, and be at a first preview that night of Beauty and the Beast. And Matt and I constantly sing to each other. We walk up and we're always singing some song. And even yesterday we were doing a song from Carnival. Like, how many people know Carnival? And over the internet we were singing. So I don't have a good answer to that.
So I'm going to ask you a slightly different question then. Which production that you weren't around for, like before our time, would you have liked to have seen? Which opening night would you have liked to have been at?
So many, but I guess each for a different reason. Like I would love to have been at the opening night of Dreamgirls.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because that was a punch through. The other one certainly would be Chorus Line. I'm just thinking of musicals that reset the clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. That when you think of all the great R&H musicals, and I think those musicals are far more important than many people do, but when you think of those, you can kind of comprehend what that would have been. But when you hear it, a 5, 6, 7, 8, and then da-da-da-da, you go out of your mind and imagine that opening night. Now, mind you, people had seen it at the Public Theater and stuff, but to be on Broadway in the Schubert Theater and seeing that, what Michael Bennett did was so outside. What must that have been like?
Yeah.
Bob Avian, who's no longer with us, but Bob, who was such a sweet, sweet man, he restaged all of Michael's stuff because he worked on it with Michael, and he put it all together, and it was all exactly the original production.
Yeah.
But of course now that's all vocabulary that we know, so we take it for granted.
Yeah, people think it's kind of old hat now.
Yeah.
And they don't realize how different it was. I mean, we had Jerry Mitchell on the podcast, and he had done Chorus Line, and it was one of his big shows that meant a huge amount to him. And just saying that it was the first time you got to hear dancers' stories and put them front of the stage and hear about their lives and what they do. Because I guess up until then, the dancers were the chorus side and didn't have a means of expressing themselves beyond that. And to spotlight that, to come out of that, where did that germ of an idea come from? I know it was a workshop. They all sort of stayed up for like 48 hours talking about it, didn't they? And it's all from these incredible
recordings.
There were those
recordings made, yeah. And there was a bit of a brouhaha about that, about who owned those recordings and whose stories. And people in the original production were actually not telling their own story, but someone else's story. And how shocking and thrilling that would have been, right? And I'll stick with those two. I think those two put a stake in the ground in very different ways. Obviously, Chorus Line to enormous success. Dreamgirls has never ever had a run that was like a shocking success run.
Where was Dreamgirls on? I don't remember.
In New York, was it at the Winter Garden? I this image of the Winter Garden, I don't know. I'm no expert on that. My friend Rick Ellis, who wrote a pile of shows, including Peter and the Starcatcher with me and stuff. Rick knows everything, every date, every show ever opened. I'm terrible at that game.
I think Dreamgirls doesn't have not the impact, it doesn't have the fandom over here because it hasn't been done as much over here. I remember when I came out to the States, it was on a big tour and I think it'd been on Broadway. And then when I came back, it was finally in the West End. I think maybe for its first run, if it was its second run, then please forgive me. But that definitely the first time in my sort of theatrical life that it's been on in London. And it was such a hit and everybody wanted to go
in New York. It had heat. David Geffen was producing it and people wanted to be there, and it was a complicated time on Broadway, and it's sort of its moment in time of punching through. That's why I just came to mind as you asked that question, because the kind of shows that surprise you, I could have been at Dreamgirls, a Chorus Line opened when I was in high school.
To be at something for the first time where you don't know what you're going to see must be so exciting. I tell you what, the one thing I came to watch in New York and I didn't know what I was going to see, apart from there was a movie of it, was Tarzan. And the opening of that, I think I came to like your third or fourth preview because Bob sorted me out. And I was like, whoa, what is this?
The drowning parents.
Yeah. And then the bungees.
Yeah, and Phil's beautiful music. I love that piece so much. I love the movie, the process by which it happened, that Phil sang the songs. That wasn't the original intention.
Right.
The fact that the life force that had, and also that we all got to work with Phil Collins, and then doing the stage version. Phil would be in the room with us rehearsing. Every time we would do like a reading of just the team to hear what the show sounded like, Phil played Professor Porter. Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
He was with us all the time. He was so dedicated to it. Because, it still runs in Germany. So
yeah, it's a huge, huge hit.
Yeah, and I just love the score so much.
Yeah.
But that was terrifying because we could never quite get it right. And, it was hard to do. My beloved Josh Strickland, who is on that cast album singing Tarzan, who's got the most amazing voice.
I'm going to say his voice is unreal. Unreal.
Yeah.
What a voice.
I adore him. And it's funny because Josh Strickland was playing Tarzan while my beloved Ashley Brown was creating the role of Mary Poppins on Broadway. And they became pals because they'd never had to do that before, create a role.
Yeah.
And they're still today. They are a riot.
They do a concert, don't they? The Disney concert.
Yeah, and then if you fold Michael James Scott, the current genie on Broadway, the three of them are quite a family they've made of being, Disney folks.
Disney family. That's so lovely. I miss out on being that over here, but I definitely felt it when I was over there. It's such a special group of people to be part of. And in America, I feel like Disney is to America what Shakespeare is to Britain.
Well, that terrifies me, but
Sorry.
but I think it's because not of what we do today, but the foundation laid by Walt Disney. It lives inside of everybody. Everybody can reference Disney. You remember where you were. You remember the first Disney movie you saw. And then, of course, because of long before we had video at home, where most of your listeners have watched our movies on DVD or video, but Walt would take the movies out of circulation and then every 7 years put them back in circulation. So the movies, when you went to the cinema to see a Walt Disney movie, you might have been seeing it the third time it was released.
Yeah.
Because he would just re-release them because the new generation because they don't age, right? The actors don't look older. And the movies never, to the casual eye, look old to them. The first one I ever saw in its first run, I would have seen Peter Pan in a rerun, if you will, recirculated version. But I saw Jungle Book in its premiere run.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's a memory.
Tom, I'm going to take a little break now for an advert or something lovely.
G'day listeners, another show you can find on the Bloop Network is Thrash and Treasure, where legendary artists from Broadway, West End, Hollywood and beyond deep dive into two seemingly opposite genres of music, heavy metal and musical theatre. From Tony winners to reality TV contestants, hear a vast range of iconic guests, learn about genres of music they've never been exposed to. With over 130 episodes, there's bound to be a silly, sassy and insightful conversation that'll have you reaching for the leather pants and hairspray. And here is a sneak peek. Anyways, guess what?
What?
We have another legendary Disney diva in the fuel chamber today. And at 5 a.m., Mr. J, am I sure wondering who disturbed my slumber? As this sleepy beauty boasts this bloke's bewildering body of work, where he has blossomed between boards and backlot by bouncing off bad guys when he burst onto the big screen as a bright-eyed band beside babes, bullets, and bell-bottoms in the blaxploitation bonanza Death Force, before blooming into one of Broadway's most beloved baritones with a bevy of bold and beautiful performances where he hopped on a showboat for a tour de force where this fully sick Mitch swung by Putnam County for a quick spell, but let's hope he didn't get his fill and Mount Olympus when he made a man out of Hercules. Hey, that's my job. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not sure I can go the distance, but with a shout out to David Zippel, we serve up a mache of jealousy sprinkled with a shred of chookers before we tink a bell and raise a toast to his dreamy dozen Disney credits that have seen him waltz into Alice's Wonderland Bakery to steal secret recipes from the disenchanted baker. So it's this Aussie's deepest pride and greatest pleasure causing me to cave in wonder at the wonderful world of Disney Neverlander's career as we watch him rocketeer and bolt up there with an iron will and the G-force of a flying carpet that was found by some Minnie Mouse and Rat rescuers down under the sands of Agrabah, where we also found a true blue Tony Award-winning genie from today's chosen Mouseicle. So we made a wish for 3 names and out popped the marvelously magical and mythologically admired Mr. James Monroe Iglehart. Yay! Welcome to the torture chamber. I can cross another dream guest off my list and die. Oh my God.
Okay, I have to say something. I have been on I have been on many a show. And I have been asked to do intros for some of my favorite WWE wrestlers.
Yep.
And let me tell you, I can honestly say, without a shadow of a doubt, after 18 years of being in this business, that was the best intro I have ever heard in my life. As a matter of fact, I need you to email that to me so I can show my friend. I need to have that. I need to frame it. It is the most amazing intro I've ever heard in my life. I am so honored. That was literally the dopest thing I've heard ever about myself. That was fire. Absolute fire. Wow.
Producers in Hollywood, are you listening? Please email me. Anyways.
That was so dope. Oh, wow.
David Zippel, obviously the lyricist of Hercules.
Yes.
Now, I would like you two gentlemen to join me on a campaign that I've mentioned on Twitter a couple of times. It is about time, Disney, that David Zippel was made a Disney legend.
I am with you on that. Honestly, I am with you on that.
He's not?
He's not, and it's about time.
I can't believe he's not. But I mean, when you think about the music in the Disney pantheon and, in the legends of Disney, go the distance. But also, if you are in any Disney park and you say, bless my soul, someone is definitely going to go, Herc was on a roll. It just happens.
It's going to be me.
It's like being in Texas. Yep. It's like being in Texas and saying the stars at night are big and bright and watching the Texans going
deep in the heart of Texas.
Thank you. If you were in any Disney area and you say, bless my soul, you may even just be saying something else. Someone's going to say Herc is on a roll. So yes, the man deserves, just for that one line, the man deserves to be a Disney legend. That is true.
Anyways, we're going to move on because we're going to move on to Hercules, or Huncules, as we call him. Now, quickly, it's 100 years of Disney this year, and there's been 61 animated movies. So if you had to quarantine with any Disney villain, but not Hades or Jafar, because I am mean, who would you most like to be stuck with for 2 weeks?
Ooh.
So you can't play favorites. Sorry.
No, please. It would probably. What's funny is I was thinking many villains, but the first one that comes to mind is Dr. Facilier from Princess and the Frog, and not just because you have it.
Okay.
Just because there's some magic, there's some coolness, there's some give a brother a pound moment we could have. I'd watch him. I would never let him stand behind me because I know he'd probably stick me in the back with a knife. But I figured I could probably kick it with him. Or honestly, just because I tempt fate because she's gorgeous, I'd kick it with Maleficent.
Okay.
Yes, my queen.
See if I can sweet talk the lady a little bit. I'd probably get killed, but hey, it was worth the climb.
Dr. Facilier, I agree with because he has some hot fashion and I would love some tips. So, yes, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the brother's always looking
That's
good.
It.
So.
See, I'm like, Ursula doesn't seem to be able to do stuff to you unless you agree with it. So I'm just like, that just seems like a cocktail buddy I would not mind hanging out with Ursula.
The first thing, John, I thought about Ursula, my problem is underwater.
Yeah.
Underwater for a long time.
Yeah, okay.
It's drowning.
Yeah. That's fair. Hadn't thought about the water.
Also, too many arms. Too many arms. I don't know where the other arms are. She could. I don't know where. I got to fight. I got too many arms.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can work with that. I'm just saying.
That's true. You know, it depends on what you're thinking.
Yeah. You just want to sleep facing her because you never know what's going
Right. Exactly. Where are you at? Where are you at?
That's it. Anyways, we are going to move on now to the musical. Actually, we're not doing Hercules. We're doing Aladdin.
Welcome back to the second part of Talk Musicals to Me with the incredible Tom Schumacher. I'm having the best time talking to you. Thank you so much, Tom. Let's jump in with my next question, which is which musical should be on a school curriculum?
I thought about this one a lot. One, I think that Newsies should be. Because Newsies, as much as the movie was not successful, the stage show is extraordinarily successful and popular. And it's historical, and it's actually at its core, not its execution, but at its core, a true story. Jack Kelly, who you meet in the show, is based on a kid named Kid Blink, who literally did this.
Wow.
He threw down his newspapers and demanded a square deal and a fair shake. And he stopped all the child labor in New York, all the kids who worked, elevator operators, couriers. We didn't have phones, we didn't have anything. So kids were sending messages all over, kids were couriers. He had them all stop. And out of that grew child labor laws in America, for which our country has an amazing history, as does yours, right? The abuse of children and then organizing this. And I think that plus, I want young people to understand that in the darkest of times, they can set things right. For young people to think it's someone else's problem is not going to get us to where we need to be as a culture and as a global community. And I love the idea when I would take kids to see Newsies, because, you know, we did it on Broadway and we toured and it's been so successful. And I was involved in these groups, the Open Doors program, where I would take 8 kids to see shows. And when I would take them to see Newsies, high school kids, they were also empowered by it or challenged in thinking they had no control. And yes, it's a fantasy, and they're so darn mad they're going to dance and all that. I get it. But I think that the message of that is powerful. Are actually Sound of Music. Mm-hmm. What actually happened to the Von Trapp family? As a metaphor, or as a symbol, rather, not a metaphor, but as a symbol, because the true story of the Von Trapp family is more complicated. But what we see in that movie, the rise of Nazism and what Captain Von Trapp does and how he believes in his country and how he is trying to fight this and what he does to hold family together and how family gets redefined. And I love that. And I think there's a lot of power in that show. I just think it's important. And the other one I thought about was actually South Pacific. And I know that we can all look at South Pacific and culturally today would we have represented people in the way we did then. But just to remind people that enormous sacrifice happened on both sides of the Atlantic during an extraordinary global conflict that destroyed lives and families. And South Pacific, you know, it's based on a book, Tales of South Pacific by James Michener. And what Rodgers and Hammerstein did with Josh Logan of creating that story, I think is powerful. The first time it was revived on Broadway was that beautiful Bart Scher production at Lincoln Center several years ago with Kelly O'Hara. And I remember everyone writing about who knew South Pacific was about racism. And I'm thinking, well, actually, all of us did. We all did this in high school. I did it in Summerstock. I played Corporal Hamilton Steves. He's important because he goes, we got sunlight on the sand. And I can't count. So this sweet guy named Roger Michelson, who played Stu Pot, would slap me on the back of the head so I'd come in on the right time. But Summerstock, I paid $500 a week, thank you very much, to not be able to sing it. I do think the R&H people, not people, but the R&H power of those shows, think about them. Even King and I, which again, complicated, but it is based on the diaries of Anna Leon Owens, which becomes Anna and the King of Siam and a movie, and then Gertrude Lawrence sees the movie and says, will you make a show out of it? By the way, she saw the movie and asked Dick Rodgers to turn that movie into a musical for her.
Oh, wow, did she?
Yeah, most people don't know that. And I just think they touch on such interesting moments in history, moments that we dedicate so few pages to in our history books in America.
Yeah. I also think they're almost too good for their own good. With The Sound of Music, it gets such a bad rap. People go, oh, it's schmaltzy, it's cheesy. It's only looked on as that because you have cute kids in it, basically. And if you take it as a true story of a family in Austria in those incredibly difficult times, then you see danger, you see risk, you see bravery, you see love. There is so much to get from The Sound of Music that I think people just absolutely dismiss. And I think it's time it was reevaluated. And maybe that's what we're doing right here, Tom.
Encouraging people to do that.
We're going to do that here. This is a lovely question, and I'm really excited because we haven't used this question very often. Which forgotten musical would you like to see remounted?
A musical that almost nobody knows was written by a man named Bill Sawley, who I did not know, called Boy Meets Boy. And I saw this as a kid, a high school student in San Francisco. It was done in New York. It was done all over the place. You can find it on Spotify. It's a charming, funny little score, and I've always wanted to see it again. When I read your question, I thought, I want to see that. But the other one is Goodbye, Mr. Chips, because Goodbye, Mr. Chips is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful movie with Peter O'Toole and Petula Clark, Michael Redgrave, with a fantastic song score by the great Leslie Brickus, who I adored. We had many crazy phone calls and stuff. We met at a party and we tried to do something that never happened. Isn't it crazy that every people I've been able to meet? It's like, I'm pinching myself talking to you. These are things I all saw before I knew these people. You know, I grew up like everyone else, loving this. And Goodbye, Mr. Chips was such a beautiful musical movie. And it was made into a musical, but only performed here in the UK. It's never been done. I don't think it was only had its one production.
Wow.
And the score, as on the album that I bought at the old Tower Records at Piccadilly Circus, because that Tower Records had the best musical collection of any record store in the world. And I would go there and buy those every time I came to London because I could get shows that I'd never heard.
Yeah.
And I would like to see someone do that show. And I never read the book for it because I can only hear the album. And the album left really good songs out, but you never quite know. And I would love to see someone revive that because it's a wonderful, wonderful story about a man who thinks there's no future for him at all. And he's quite stuffy, and he meets the love of his life, who he can't imagine he would ever fall in love with because he just thinks he's a teacher. And then the boys all see him differently because he's married to this actress. I just love it so much. If you've never seen the movie of it, strap yourself in on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And they made a stage show from the movie with the songs, but I'd like to see that revived and set straight. And then Boy Meets Boy.
Boy Meets Boy.
Yeah.
So you know what to do, guys. You need to get Googling and getting on Spotify and listening to these. I mean, I know the Goodbye, Miss Chips songs. They are fantastic. Let's hope that happens. I would really love to see that. Is there a musical which inspired you to make a strong choice in your life?
This is the silliest thing, but the first thought that hit me, I fell in love with the Pippin cast album when it was first released. I didn't know what happened in the show. I didn't know. I just knew that I loved that album and I loved those songs. And then the first summer Pippin was in release for Summerstock, Stock and Amateur, I played Pippin in a Summerstock theater. And then bizarrely, later in life, I have done, a number of things with Stephen Schwartz, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Pocahontas, what have you, and stage versions of Hunchback, 2 different versions. The song is Time to Start Livin', Bertha's song. And I went through a very rough patch when I started producing and then running, eventually, Disney Animation, producing movies and then being in charge of the studio. I went through a really rough patch. I've never told Stephen Schwartz this, but every morning on the way in, I would play It's Time to Start Livin' over and over as I approached the studio because it gave me context and it gave me the strength to go to work at a time I thought, I just can't get through this day. And I can't fully explain to you why, but there's something about the Irene Ryan recording and the original cast album that just says, you gotta get out there and do it.
Yeah.
And it taps into a little bit of Ruth Gordon and Harold and Maude, get out there and L-I-V-E live. Otherwise you got nothing to talk about in the locker room.
Yeah.
That's a line from Harold and Maude.
Yeah.
And, but that idea of at that end of your life, take things seriously and get going. And so it encouraged me to get through a period when I thought I was gonna, jump off a cliff.
Oh, Tom, I think that's wonderful. And I'm really glad you didn't, because you really have been one of the most remarkable people in the musical theatre industry. So, and the fact that that's aided you.
I have a friend who was in the Israeli army, he was a tank commander, I think, and I had to go through some really, really hard times. Unsettling would be to any of us, as it was to him, and was also struggling with his own life choices. The original cast album of Rent got him through. And I think that people who create musicals hear from people so often about how things have touched them. And like even you were saying about Sound of Music, that someone might say it's schmaltzy or this, or people are dismissive about the work that you and I have dedicated our whole lives to. And yet, these shows dig deep inside people, deep inside people, and build such strong memories for them and give them themes for their life. And they get to be inside of other characters because they get to sing along with them or sing it by themselves.
When you were talking earlier about listening to the records on your days off sick, one of my stories of those is when I was probably like 2.5, 3, and my mum was doing like the hoovering around me. like the vacuum cleaning, she would put these big headphones on my head and play this record of Mary Poppins. And it wasn't the album from the musical. I feel like it was maybe like Marnie Nixon or Charmian Carr, somebody like that. Sorry, the lights are going really dark. Is this the ghost of Drury Lane going to darken the lights? And I'd have the headphones on, and it would be the story with a few songs interspersed, and I would follow. The album cover had the pages, and you could read along. And, I couldn't read, but I could look at the pictures. I can see them now if I close my eyes. And Richard Sherman was one of the voices on it. He played Uncle Albert on that album. And I just remember feeling at that age, and then when I first saw Mary Poppins, just this joy. And it is one of those, I've played Mary Poppins, I've done it for, hundreds of shows. I can still watch that movie and I can still listen to that music and it will still bring me back.
I used to tell Richard Sherman this all the time, that I am of an age where I was lucky enough to see Mary Poppins in its original first engagement at Grauman's Chinese Theater.
Wow.
On Hollywood Boulevard. And on the way home in the car, the family was all bouncy and my sisters were probably singing, Super Cal or something. And I became obsessed with Feed the Birds, which I was obsessed as a child. I was a little boy then. Mm-hmm. And there's something about the ennui of that song, and I knew what it was about in some other level. And I told Richard this, and that's when I learned that it was Walt Disney's favorite song, and that they would play it for him on Friday afternoons. And, these songs live inside people because you relate to the characters and the story. They're not songs without context. They're songs that are about context. So, anyway.
And that's why I don't love pop music. I like show tunes, and I'm not ashamed to say it. Our next question, Tom, is what is the secret to a good musical?
I'm asked oftentimes about what's the secret to this, what's the trick to this, what is the recipe for success? And I would tell you without hesitation, the recipe for success is the formula for failure. If you think you know what the recipe is,
there is none.
There is none. And if you try to follow a recipe, it'll never work. Now, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is not a recipe. It's a set of ideas that you can, like a dim sum menu, you can pick and choose from.
Yeah.
But they usually have to stack up in the order that Campbell lays them out for you. But you have to write your own story. I just don't think there's a trick. Like, look at Maybe Happy Ending. What a joyous, beautiful experience it is. I've seen it a few times. Just won the Tony, based on the day we're sitting here, which is a few days ago, it won the Tony as Best Musical, and our pal Michael Arden won, and all our friends on that show won. And who would have ever said that was going to be a hit musical?
Yeah.
Who would have ever said that?
I love the music. I haven't seen it yet, but the number they did on the Tonys, I loved. It was so simple and delicate.
Well, you see it. It's so beautifully staged.
Yeah.
And you can't predict that would work.
No.
Bill Finn, who just passed away this year, March of the Falsettos. Who would have ever said that's a story that you'd want to see? And that's an unforgettable score. Unforgettable. And such a moment in time to hear that. And who would have ever thought that? You can't imagine what's going to capture you.
That's what must be so fun about being a producer, having all these ideas thrown at you. I read something about the Gong Show that would happen at Disney, like anyone can come in.
Anyone could come and you could be the receptionist, you could anywhere in the building, and you could pitch an idea to me and Roy Disney and Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg. And a lot of things. Mermaid came from that, Pocahontas came from that. Aida, Elton John's musical, started as an idea in animation, and it was too sophisticated for animation, but that grew out of the Gong Show. Hercules grew out of the Gong Show. A guy named Joe Haydar pitched Hercules.
Wow.
I remember all these people who did
That's
it.
so great.
Lisa Keane pitched Aida.
You just pop your name in a box and go, I'd like to come and pitch you an idea. And
You get vetted a little bit so they can help you. Some people would pitch 4 words, maybe we'll tell a whole story.
does that still happen?
I don't know what they do now.
Right.
Doesn't seem like it.
I love that idea, though. What a great idea. So, my final question. We're at the end. Which musical feeds your soul?
Well, rapid fire, because I actually wrote that depends on what my soul needs.
Okay.
So we've talked about Dolly, but Dolly is there with Jerry's songs when my soul just needs the comfort of nostalgia. Newsies feeds my soul when I need some joy. Company, George Firth and Steve Sondheim's beautiful musical that I think oftentimes is just assumed to be great. That one really feeds me when I need wit and wisdom. There's so much wisdom in Company. I was lucky enough to know George as well as Steve. I didn't know Steve well. We'd see each other at parties and talk. But George I spent a lot of time with. And, him telling me like where it came from and what it meant to him and what he thought of different productions. And I remember when I saw that beautiful production here with the gender swap. And the first thing I said afterwards was, oh my God, George would have loved this, But the wit and wisdom of that, you're always sorry, you're always grateful, you're always wondering what might have been. Steve's lyrics in that. And I just love it because it's, again, everything has to be contextualized in its sort of little moment in time, It's
real people, isn't it? And I think with Sondheim, a lot of it, it's Sweeney Todd or it's Into the Woods. And obviously they're all relatable. Of course they are, Stephen Sondheim and all his collaborators. But Company feels like it's the one that is most in our real life world,
Yeah. It works for me. And of course, we talked about a little night music before this, but I literally just played it in my little apartment that I've taken while we're here for Hercules, where Ralph Nicholas Nickleby,'s older brother, lived on Golden Square.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I hope I'm right with that. Someone's going to fact check me. What we didn't talk about is Ain't Misbehavin', which isn't a musical, it's a review, but that music by Fats Waller taught me so much. I saw the original cast do it, and I just adore it, because without that, I wouldn't have understood what the genie is supposed to be in Aladdin.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have really understood that music. That's like the number one great album to put on if you have to get something done in the house and be in a hurry, because it's just so perfect.
Yeah.
That was our last question, right?
That was our last question, Tom.
It's over already?
It's over already. I'm gutted, but I'm so fulfilled.
Well, I'm tickled that you got off of Zoom and that I'm with you live.
I know.
And that we're here. I can't imagine who's going to be interested in this conversation, but that's your job.
Well, that's my
your
job to sell it. And I'm apologizing now because obviously this is the first time, so we've got like technical things going on and emails coming up, which I've forgotten to
And they're
switch
drilling
off,
on the floor out here.
There's like stuff going on because Hercules is happening. You're in previews.
We have preview number 4 tonight.
Going well?
Yes, yesterday, 68 pages of the script had a change on them.
Oh, good Lord.
So our beautiful cast, Lucas down there and Mayana down there, and there's Stephen Carlisle, who was with us as Scar for a long time, and now he's over here playing Hades, and our glorious muses, but everyone's getting new stuff. Casey Nicola is fearless.
Yeah.
And we restage, we do things every day.
This is where it happens, isn't it? When a show gets shaped, it's in previews because you've got the audience, they are responding to what you have been rehearsing to, and you realize what works, what hits, what doesn't.
And what doesn't quite connect.
It changes so much.
Yeah, and we do a thing when we're in previews is we take days off.
Right.
So that we get full days. So tomorrow is another one. We take the whole day off. So we have a big, long rehearsal day to prep things that will then go in on Friday. And we took a day off on Monday after the first 2 previews. And then also the audience changes, But what's been fun for me, if you were 12 years old when the movie opened of Hercules, which, I was there for the very first second, Joe Hadar said, how about Hercules? Yeah. Till now it's on stage. But if you were 12 when you saw the movie, you are now 40 years old.
Wow.
So when you look at the audience, I know, isn't that cuckoo?
That's so depressing.
When you look at the audience, you're looking at people who grew up with this. They had the clamshell video, then they had the DVD, and they know Susan Egan's extraordinary performance of I Won't Say I'm in Love, and these things are in their heads, There's a great song that Roger Bart, who was a voice in the original film, he was young Hercules, and Roger sang a song called Shooting Star, which you can actually find on YouTube, the original storyboard in that. And I saw that's all in my head, all these people who did it and everything, and who they are now. Like Roger felt like a kid then, and now he's,
Now he's the old guy in
I
Back
know.
to the Future.
No, that's it. Well, unfortunately, each man in his time plays many parts.
Yeah. Next time you do Mary Poppins, I'll be the bird woman.
Rosie Ash, I was doing the last tour, and it's like I thought, my God, Rosie, you did the show with us when we first started it in Bristol all those years ago. And it was fun to see her when I went out to visit this tour. I love the idea of people growing into roles. We've had Simbas become songs. We've had Nalas come into the show. We've had kids grow up in it.
Loving it, by the way, Rosie Ash.
Is
She's
she?
one of my dearest friends.
Oh, what a treat.
She's having an absolute blast
What
playing
a
Mrs.
treat.
Brill.
But look at Nick Jonas played Chip in Beauty and the Beast on Broadway.
No way, I did not know that.
Yeah, Nick was a chip.
Nick was a chip.
Was a chip.
Great line.
It's funny that it's people who've grown up with us and then they evolve into the different kind of roles. I saw Glynis Johns, who was the original Desiree, in the original production on Broadway of A Little Night Music, play Madame Armfeldt.
Wow, oh my God.
And her liaisons would knock your socks off.
Wow.
She's of course gone. And of course, she was,
She was Mrs. Banks. Yeah.
Do you know the story about her song? And then I'll let you go.
I do.
Yeah, that it was the original.
Practically perfect
In every way.
Yeah.
I know, hers was the original Practically Perfect.
I love
by the
that.
Sherman Brothers. And then they cut the song, made it Sister Suffragette.
Yeah.
And then George Stiles and Antony Drew, who did such glorious work on our stage version
They
of it.
really did.
They were the glue that told that story. And they wrote these beautiful new songs. And then they wrote the beautiful Practically Perfect that you got to do.
I had people telling me, like, swearing blind that Practically Perfect and Anything Can Happen were in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, no, it's just so good. It fits so well.
Richard would call it the best song I never wrote.
What a wonderful man. And you are a wonderful man as well. Thank you so much, Tom. I know you have to go because you have got the whole world to conquer and to carry on conquering. But thank you so much for spending some time talking musicals to me today.
You can't imagine what a treat this was. Thank you.
Oh, biggest treat ever for me.
That was fun.
You're an absolute legend. I'm so sorry we've run over.
Oh, no, it's
my
good.
God.
Oh, my God, I'm right.
I have to tell you, I really cannot believe how lucky I am to have had an hour of Tom's time. Please go ahead and have a look at some of his other interviews and chats online. He is so fabulous, entertaining, fun, knowledgeable. It's amazing. And it's no surprise that he has made Disney Theatrical the huge success it has been and continues to be. I did notice in his haste, he accidentally said that Hercules closes on the 24th of June. It's the 24th of June today, and I'm off to the opening night, which is very exciting. So I think we can safely say he meant opens, not closes. Let's hope for a lovely long run here at Drury Lane for Hercules and his muses. What an absolute treat. I have loads of people to thank for this special episode, so please bear with me. Obviously, huge thanks to Tom, to Dennis, Alexa and Alice from Disney Theatrical, to Hannah and Luna for their amazing work setting up the sound, to everyone at Drury Lane, including Fraser and Graham on stage door, who we love in the Gibson household, as they were both on our stage doors in our original West End debuts, separate West End debuts, and they were both there for us. So that was lovely to see them. Big thanks to Mike for being the roadie for the day. Thanks to the ghosts at Theatre Royal Drury Lane for behaving themselves on the whole. There was a bit of a glitch in the system, but we're not sure if that was a ghost or just a dodgy old laptop. Who knows? And obviously, huge thanks to brilliant Aaron for his editing of the echoey chamber, which added such fabulous atmosphere, but obviously needed to be tamed down for your listening pleasure. And he just does a remarkable job every time on these podcasts. So send him loads of love. And thank you guys for being amazing and joining me on this podcast journey. Thank you so much for listening today. This has been Talk Musicals to Me for the Bloop Network. My fabulous producer is Aaron Ware, and the music you heard is from the pen of the sublime Tom Self. If you get a moment, please subscribe or follow and rate the podcast by clicking the stars below on the podcast page. It takes about 2 seconds to do, and it will really help the podcast and its future life and would make us massively, eternally, enormously grateful. In the meantime, another huge thanks for tuning in, and please do so again next time to see who will be next up to talk musicals to me.